On today's edition of the Red Sox Rundown, we have Red Sox coaching news that you're going to want to hear about. We got a big story from Rob Bradford a little bit earlier today, and a lot of the names that people were hoping might get fired, it seems like they might not be going anywhere. We also have the latest rumors on Pete Alonso. I know that a lot of people in my comments, on the Instagram, everywhere under the sun, want Pete Alonso on this team. Are you willing to pay for him, though? We're going to talk about the latest update around the Pete Alonso sweepstakes. Before we get into any of that, though, I want to make this a weekly thing in the offseason. I want to do Q&A videos all offseason long, at least once a week. Answer your guys' questions, give my thoughts. You can give your trade IDs, you can give your this, your that, the other thing. I want to be able to interact with you guys. I want to get you guys on the video. So if you want to get on a video this week, we'll put your name, we'll have your YouTube icon or your Twitter icon or wherever. Go down in the comments in this video and ask a Red Sox question. Let's keep it Red Sox-centric. Talk about the lineup, the rotation, what you think they're, a trade candidate that you might want to trade for, someone to go after in free agency. Ask your questions down below in the comments. I'm going to pull the best ones and put them on a Q&A video later this week. I really want to do it. I want to make it a weekly thing. So let's start off hot and put a bunch of questions down below in the comments that you want answered in a Q&A this week. All right, let's talk about coaching first. Rob Bradford had this a few hours ago. He said, per sources, Red Sox hitting coach Pete Fatse, pitching coach Andrew Bailey, third base coach Kyle Hudson, first base coach Jose Flores, bench coach bullpen coach Chris Holt, and bench coach Ramon Vasquez will all be returning. Now, this has not been, seconded by anyone yet at the time of recording this, but I trust Bradford. Come on. If he's reporting something, I trust it to be legit. And I know a lot of people are going to be mad about this. The two names in particular, Pete Fatse, Kyle Hudson, are the ones that come to mind in terms of maybe potentially making some coaching changes. But in the end, this is what I expected. We all wanted changes. In some way, shape, or form, I was calling for Pete Fatse. I think a new hitting coach might, be able to bring some life into this Red Sox team. But Alex Cora is also incredibly loyal, and he likes to keep his guys around. And let's talk about both Fatse and Hudson, because, again, I know those are the two names that everyone is coming after. Let's talk about Fatse first. There is no doubt that the Red Sox were horrible with runners in scoring position this year. It was their Achilles heel, for better or for worse, but literally for worse. It was their Achilles heel. And they also had a strikeout problem. I think that's another thing that we could admit this year. But if you look at the other base level offensive metrics, they were usually top 10 in baseball at the lowest. Again, when you're looking at average runs scored, things of that nature, the Red Sox were in the top 10 of all of baseball. So obviously, Pete Fatse's doing something right. Now, could he refine his technique? Could they refine their overall offensive, strategy? Yes. And I do think we started to see them do that at the end of the season. Bringing in more bunts, trying to move runners over more, hit the ball the other way. But at that point, it was too little too late. And you got into the postseason and you reverted back to your old ways. We saw that at the end of the season when they were pushing. They were starting to play more small ball. They were starting to, just get the ball in play. But then when they got into the postseason, they completely reverted back to their old ways. So I do think that, again, Fatse's doing something right, but there are definitely issues that need to be addressed, not just from him and Cora and the coaching staff, but also roster-wise. Let's, this is not a shot at Nick Sogard, David Hamilton, Nate Eaton. This is not a shot at any of those guys. They all played their role. They did what they did. They're not everyday major league players. They're not. And we were trotting all of them. We were trotting Nate Eaton and Nick Sogard and Rob Refsnyder out in our starting lineup in the first two games of the playoffs. Let's just be serious and look in the mirror for a second. Roster-wise, you weren't there either. So while I was calling for Fatse, while a lot of people were calling for Pete Fatse, that one does kind of make a little sense why he is sticking around, at least for next season. How about Kyle Hudson? Some inexcusable mistakes at third this season. No doubt. No doubt. In the postseason, when you needed to score runs, some inexcusable mistakes. I think the leash for Kyle Hudson is going to be very short this season. Now, you haven't heard a lot about him in the past, over the past few years, which is a good thing. Like, if you're a third base coach, you don't ever want to be talked about. When you're talked about, that means you screwed something up. It just so happened that Kyle Hudson went on a chain of making bad decisions at the end of the year. So, I do think his leash will be short. I'm not saying like a mid-season firing or anything, but if he continues to have a string of bad decisions next year, he could get the boot by the end of next season. But at the end of the day, the rest of the coaches, it is what it is. I do want to give a tip of the cap. I do think we have to give a tip of the cap to what Andrew Bailey was able to do this season. He got a lot of flack last year, rightfully so. The second half of the season, the pitching in general struggled last season. But this season, he was really good. I mean, just look at the prospects. Connolly Early, Peyton Tolley. You've also got Tyler Ruberstein, David Sandlin down in AAA. Like, they are starting to finally have a farm system of pitchers that are relatively intriguing. You also look at the other players. Kyle Harrison, they completely revamped his arsenal when he got traded from San Francisco. Lucas Giolito looked really good. Brian Bayo, I believe, took a step forward. Garrett Crochet was fantastic. Cy Young finalist, in my opinion. You're probably going to argue with me by saying, Jack, what about Dustin May? What about Jordan Hicks? What about Walker Buehler? I think there's a common theme with all of them. They all didn't buy in to the structure, to the program. There was reports about Walker Buehler at the All-Star break talking about how he, went down to another pitching lab during the All-Star break and kind of refined some stuff. He did not buy into the system. Dustin May came in at the end of the year. He didn't buy into the system. He came in at the trade deadline. There was no time for him to buy into the system. He was bad. And then Jordan Hicks, he was very vocal about pitch selection, pitch sequencing, how he didn't like certain things of what the Red Sox were doing. So it's pretty clear. If they didn't buy into the system, they didn't pitch well. But like Giolito bought into the system. He talked about it this year, talked about the pitching and how instrumental Bailey was. We know that Bayo has bought into the system. And then all these other prospects, we know they've bought into the system as well. So you've got to give a big tip of the cap to Andrew Bailey. There was more good that happened this season than bad. And, for someone that got a lot of flack after last season for the kind of atrocious collapse of the rotation and bullpen, and our bullpen, don't forget, was one of the best in baseball this year. So it's a tip of the cap to Andrew Bailey. Do you agree with keeping the coaching staff around? Type Y for yes if you do. Type N for no if you do not. I think a lot of people are going to be typing their N for no's. I can understand that argument. But like I said, at the end of the day, Cora is incredibly loyal. He likes to keep around his guys. And it didn't really surprise me at the end of the day that nobody got fired. If something does happen, whether that be a trade or free agency sign, whether a coach does get fired, we will have a video. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and join the channel today. We are 25 subscribers away from our next goal of 6,500. If there's 25 of you that are watching this video that have not subscribed already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You are going to get daily content around the Boston Red Sox. That's my guarantee to you. And when we get into the end of November, early December, buckle up, ladies and gentlemen, because it's going to get absolutely crazy when trades, free agency, the hot stove, that all begins. So lock in, get ready, and join the channel today. Let's finish with Pete Alonso. So Mike Puma of the New York Post released an article a few days ago about the Pete Alonso sweepstakes. And John Heyman has linked the Red Sox to Pete Alonso. Mark Feinzen has linked the Red Sox to Pete Alonso. Multiple national baseball writers, not just the Red Sox guys, national writers and reporters on baseball have linked the Red Sox to Pete Alonso. I know a lot of people that watch this show want the Red Sox to sign Pete Alonso. It might come at a price though. And that's not surprising, but I think it might come at a price that none of us were really expecting. So Tyler Milliken aggregated a little bit of Mike Puma's article. This was kind of the big point. Pete Alonso is expected to seek a contract of at least 7 years. He also acknowledged the reality that he'll likely be a DH at some point during this contract, but it's unclear how soon he'll be open to that change. Alonso will enter his age 31 season in 2026. I want to start by saying, and I think a lot of people will agree with me on this, this is an absolute ludicrous asking price from Scott Boras and Pete Alonso. Got a short-term deal last year with an opt-out. Played for a year, is now back in free agency. He's a great ball player. He is. But at least 7 years. At least 7 years. And then, of course, we don't have the number of how much, but it's going to be in the, probably 200s, I would guess. I'd be surprised if it gets to the 300s, but it could, depending on how long the deal is. But I think that's just an absolutely ludicrous asking price for Pete Alonso because, look, he's good, great on offense. There's no doubt about that. He's incredibly consistent. He hits the ball with power, and he would fit perfectly in Boston. But with the goods, there's also the bads. He's not great on defense. And if he's going to be your first baseman, you want a good defensive first baseman. Alonso's not that. He's not horrible, but he's not great either. He's not a consistent defender. And everyone craps on Tristan Casas for being a horrible defender at first base. Alonso's not great either. He's not. And the age is a concern. Everyone's telling me don't re-sign Alex Bregman because he's going to be 31 years old. Pete Alonso's going to be 31 years old. So, we have to ask ourselves, what's more worth it? I'm not giving a major long-term deal to a potential DH. And in that article, they said he realizes eventually he's going to have to be a DH, not going to be a first baseman forever. How much of that contract is he just purely a DH? That was the whole argument with Juan Soto this last offseason. Was like, you're paying him all this money. How much of that is for him to be a DH? That's why everyone's mad about Masataka Yoshida. We're paying all this money for just a glorified DH. Well, you'd be doing the same thing if you signed Pete Alonso. Now, again, I don't want this to sound like I'm crapping on Pete Alonso. I would love to sign Pete Alonso. I want to make that abundantly clear. But not at the 7+ years. And not at 300+ mil. I would not do that. I'd rather re-sign Alex Bregman, bring in a pitcher, and, bring in some competition for Casas. See what Casas has. Sign Kyle Schwarber. I'd be much more likely to sign Kyle Schwarber than I would Pete Alonso, in my opinion. It's just my opinion. But the main point I'm trying to get to here is this is for all the people that do not want to re-sign Alex Bregman and want Tristan Casas off the team. And I feel like those two people are the same person. So I'm going to ask you. Everyone says, go get Pete Alonso. Okay. So you want a 31-year-old who's not great defensively, but can hit at Fenway. That's what you want. But you don't want Alex Bregman, who's great defensively, can also hit at Fenway and is exactly the same age. You don't want Tristan Casas, who's probably just as good defensively, while he hasn't shown the upside because he's had 2 freak injuries, but is also cheap. You're gonna have to there's no such thing as a perfect player. And so, what's the lesser of two evils? Pete Alonso may be the lesser of two evils. But in my opinion, I'd rather re-sign Alex Bregman, bring in Kyle Schwarber, and bring in another pitcher than paying 7+ year huge contract to Pete Alonso. I'd rather see what Tristan Casas has when he's fully healthy. But we'll see. We'll see. I would be perfectly happy signing Pete Alonso, but we got to see what the contract is because there are concerns there. And you're lying to yourself if you say there aren't. There are concerns. I think what Pete Alonso and Scott Boras is asking for is ludicrous. It's ludicrous. That's for too much. But we'll see what happens. Maybe someone will pay. Maybe Steve Cohen will pay. Maybe Dave Dombrowski will pay. Maybe the Dodgers will pay. Maybe the Red Sox will pay. I don't know. But we'll see what happens. So you make the call. You let me know. Would you sign Pete Alonso to a 7+ year deal? Type S for sign if you would. Type P for pass if you would not. I really want to know your guys' thoughts down below in the comment section. Again, love Pete. Think he's a great dude. I think he'd be a perfect fit in Boston. I'm not willing to give him a 7+ year deal for high 2s, low 3s. I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to do that. I'd rather take my chances elsewhere. But you let me know. S for sign, P for pass, let me know down below in the comments. That's where we're going to end it, guys. Thank you all so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you've not already, again, make sure you hit that subscribe button. 25 subscribers away from 6,500 subscribers. I promise you, when we get into the end of November, get into December, it's gonna get spicy real quick. And we're going to be here for every single move, every single video, all of it. So don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button, and until next time, go Sox.